What? Oh, that's the projector warming up? I hope so. Okay, so I don't know if you found it to be a little bit easier than some of the other workshops. Part of it is that this is really a refactor, right? There's not a lot of new code that we're actually writing. We're actually just refactoring things. And this is one of those things that could be a little bit thankless, because you could say, you know, when you're working somewhere, you say, well, what are you working on this week? Or, you know, what are you working on? And you're like, oh, well, you know, I refactored all this code. I made it a lot easier to maintain and this stuff. And they'll say, well, show me the new features, right? I'm like, well, there are no new features, but nothing broke. And look at this, I can change an album and it will change in 3 different places. But this is kind of the nature of the beast. You run into this in places if you didn't necessarily use directives, you see a use for them later on. It's a refactor, but I think most reasonable places would say that this is going to be a win-win for everybody in terms of the code base. And one of the ways that you see this, I mean, if you start looking at the same functionality and you're seeing a lot less lines of code, that's pretty good. Okay, and that's kind of what's going to end up, that's what's going to be happening here. So the first thing that we're going to start out with is right now we've got our sidebar. Let's take a look and see where we are. So we've got our sidebar, and what we actually want to do here is, here's our sidebar. We want to do something like this. We want to basically be able to take all this stuff out and basically just have a sidebar directive that ends up loading all this stuff. Now, again, one thing to keep in mind, right? If it turns out that you're not creating any sort of isolate scope on your directive, it's really as simple as taking all your UI, all your HTML, and literally copying and pasting it into a directive file. Again, what's going to happen is whatever scope was available before is going to be available within the directive. This is the first step, okay? You might want to isolate things, to test them out, to make them more reusable, and that sort of thing. But this is the first step. This is going to do nothing more than make our, to basically make it a little bit easier. If someone says, hey, look, I want to add something to the sidebar, you don't have to go in and scroll through the index.html. So let's also just think about the rationale as to why we're doing this. This is basically separating out a big file into 2 smaller pieces. This book, by the way, might work exactly the same as what you were talking about to do the ng include. But let's assume that maybe later on down the line we'll end up doing something with it. So what I'm going to do here is, let's actually go over here, and we have this sidebar controller. Let's create a sidebar directive. Let's just see what happens, right? So I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to say this is going to be my sidebar directive. And I'll go in here in the steps in terms of creating a directive. We've got our juke object, directive, sidebar, and we're going to return a directive definition object. Again, my sort of starting point is to maybe just do something as simplistic as this. And just a template with just some text in here. And now if we end up going to our index.html, we've got our sidebar controller. And we'll go over here, and this is going to be our sidebar directive. Okay? And if we go back here and we reload this, holy moly, our sidebar has totally disappeared. Okay? Again, what the directive is doing is the directive is replacing the sidebar with its own content. Okay? But at least we can see that we end up getting this to show up. This is not the effect that we want. We want to move what we had in our page to this sidebar. So My second thing maybe would be to do something like this and specify that, we really don't want this template. We actually want a template URL, and let's assume we're going to have something in /JS sidebar templates and sidebar.html. Okay. Now again, if we don't have it, we get these error messages that are our friends. And if we reload this, we should see that we get an error that pertains to the fact, hopefully, do we? Yes. Here's our error that says, hey, look, you're telling me that you have a template URL that you don't have, and we can make this error go away by putting in a templates folder. And let's add sidebar.html. Now it's empty. So now this will just make this error go away, but also everything here is going away as well. Which is right here. And take everything that's in our sidebar, is here, go all the way down here, take it, go back here, go over here to our sidebar template, paste it in. Format it a little bit. And now we've got our sidebar back. Okay? Accomplished nothing other than taking this file here and simplifying it quite a bit, right? Where before we had a lot of content here, now we have none. Now let me just point out one other thing here, and this is sort of left over from something else. Our sidebar control is doing absolutely nothing. In fact, if you end up looking over at the sidebar controller, it has no functionality. It had some. At some point, it was actually going in and we were using it to click on things and broadcast something to this scope to change our views and that sort of thing. Right now, it's got no functionality, so let's ditch it. And if we're ditching it here, let's go back to our index page. And let's go back up here to our sidebar controller and get rid of that. And let's make sure that on our index page, we're not accessing that controller. The sidebar control doesn't exist. Again, if I reloaded this here, right, you've seen this 1,000 times. If you have an NG controller and it can't find the controller, it'll give us an error message about it. So let's take that out. It wasn't doing anything anyway. So purely just from a maintainability perspective, if I'm on a development team, I can say to somebody, hey, look, we're going to add another thing to the sidebar. And I don't have to say, oh, well, where is that? Well, look in the index file over here. No, just look in the sidebar. And then you can end up back. So again, if you don't specify any sort of scope, which we haven't done, there's really nothing that you really have to do here. Again, starting out by creating a directive is very, very easy, right? It's nothing more than moving things into a template and creating your directive. Okay, so that's going to take care of the sidebar. Now, we've got two places that end up listing albums. We've got albums here, and we also have, when we go into artists, we've got albums here as well. Okay, so let's actually take a look at setting that up. I think sort of, let's look at the places we're going to have to do this. So we've got our, let's start off with our albums, right? So we've got this template for our albums, which is going to repeat all of our albums here. Right, we've got this collection of albums that we're looking at. So just as a starting point, I think maybe what we can do is just go over here and say, hey, look, this is going to be an album list. You don't have to start reinventing the wheel in one shot. Right now, this would be, and just to make sure we're in the right spot, let's just maybe do something like this. Go back to our albums. And here's our XYZ. I know I'm in the right spot. So right now, this is doing absolutely nothing. This is going to end up getting ignored. And what we could end up doing here is we could end up setting this up. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add a directive here, and I'm going to call this album list directive.js. And again, just as a starting point, juke, directive, right? This is going to be, this is camel case, album list, function. My sanity check is to return an object. Template is going to equal, we'll just print out album list here. Right, so this is what we're going to be working from here. Let's go back to our index page. And so now one of the other includes that we're going to put in is we've got these albums. And so this is going to be our album list directive. And let me just see if I think I did a dash here. So this is going to be album dash list. Correct. And let's just call it album list. Let me go back over here. And we have playlist. We'll say album list. Okay. So now once we end up doing that, we should be able to go back here and see that we have our album list here. And as our starting point, we could go and say, hey, look, this is really going to be a template URL. And where's this going to go? Well, we're going to put this in /js album templates album list HTML. And let's just, so we don't end up getting that error message, let's go over here. And we'll actually create this file, album list HTML. So now if we go back here, we shouldn't see any error message, but we also don't see any content either. So again, starting point, whenever you're creating a directive, is literally to go in and do a copy and paste here. If we end up going back to our albums, I could go over here. And if we go to our album list, we can paste this in here. And now, this will show up the same way. Let's just sort of ask this question here. See if I could throw you guys for a little loop here. Sort of like the dance game we did before. Where's my controller?
Yeah, it's coming from the HTML outside.
Is it?
No, it's from the state. It's from the state, yeah.
There you go, right? Okay, it's not. It's coming. I mean, that's what I thought about too when I first looked at this. I said, "Oh, did I lose my controller?" But again, this is being loaded as a template, right? So that album list ends up coming in as a template, and we've got our controller, which is putting these values on the scope. Okay? Now, let's now just think about this for a second of how we want to reuse it. Let's go back and look at where we're sort of duplicating this code, but we're duplicating it, but not exactly, right? If we end up going back and we look at this page here, which is going to be our artists, and we go over here, we've also got albums, okay? So if we end up looking at, going here and we dig down into our artist and we look at the artist templates, we've got this artist albums.html. And boy, it looks almost the same here, right? I mean, if we went back over here, maybe we could do something. We could say, man, I really feel like I should be able to do this, you know? Can I go over here and can I delete this and say, hey, look, let's use the album list directive. Seems reasonable enough, right? Looks the same, right? Whew, not great. Okay. Now the difference here was that if I undo this change, is that before my scope had albums directly on the scope. Okay. Now on the scope that I'm passing in here, I don't have albums directly on. What I have is an artist, and the artist has albums. So now when we think about passing data to our directive, we're thinking about passing data. We're not passing a string, so we're passing data, so we think of the, there you go. So let's go back to our directive over here. Again, we'll do this one step at a time. When we've changed our directive to work with its own scope, then we could go and we could modify it for the other one. So if we go back here to our album, we look at our album list directive that I have open here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to specify a scope, an isolated scope. This way I've got some reusability. Okay? If I was just sort of wanting to copy and paste something, I don't need to isolate the scope. But now what I want to be able to do here is I want to pass in albums. Okay? Now, if I go back here to my albums, I reload this guy. Okay? No errors, but no albums either. Okay? So I'm going to go back up to my templates for my albums. And on my scope, I've got a collection of albums. So I'm just going to pass. The only way that you pass things to a directive is through attributes. Albums equals albums. Hello. Right? Back in business. So now I've got the ability now to say, hey, look, this is really where this ends up, becoming very powerful. I'm saying, hey, look, your job directive is to render albums. Okay? My job is to give you the albums to render. So the only thing that I do is to pass in these albums to this directive. Okay? And again, the directive is used to basically dry out, okay? Dry out, make your code repeat yourself a lot less, right? Don't repeat yourself. So we're drawing out our not methods or that sort of things that we would end up doing with the factory, but it's our client-side code that we're drawing out. So now we could go back and I could go to my artist, and an artist has a artist albums page, and I could say albums list, and this is going to be albums, but this is now going to be the artist albums. All right, key takeaway is that when you pass data into directives, you end up doing it through attributes. Okay? When you're going to pass something other than a string, you're going to pass some data in there, equal sign. So let's go down here and get rid of this stuff. Keep them both there, but we have two lists. It wouldn't make any sense. And now, if we go to my artists, let's reload this. And here, go to albums. Say we go to albums. See what I'm missing here. Albums, artists.albums. Let's see. All right, so let's troubleshoot this a little bit. So one of the things you could do here is that if we end up clicking on this, we could inspect it. And let's see if there's anything that's inside here. So this is our, we're going down here. Here are songs, and here are albums. Here's our UI view, and here's our album list that doesn't have anything in it. And let's tell something. So we've got our, let's just go back and take a look, album list. Okay, so that was the problem. Again, so you look at that, if you misspell something, it's basically going to say, look, I can't find this directive. Yeah, Angular is not going to find the directive, and it's going to, the browser is basically going to ignore it, right? So it's not album, we're calling it album list, so that's legitimate. And so we'll go over here, and so this is not albums list, but album list. And now we will get all of our albums back, okay? So we've now, this is a real win, right? I mean, we've basically taken this, if we now want to modify things, we've got one place to do it, and we could look at our template here for our album list, and if we wanted to change something here, capitalize this, do it in one spot, and we've done it here. And if we go back here, we've done it here as well. Okay? So let's actually look at our next directive that we're going to end up taking care of here. And that is that let's actually, right now, we've got our, let's do one other thing with a couple of these out. And so here on our index page, we've got our player. That's also something that it wouldn't hurt to sort of move out of here so the functionality is not of our index page. If someone wants to modify the player, they might have a tough time going in and finding it. Again, this is a fairly easy one to do. You had a question?
Oh, no, stretch it.
I knew. I'm just messing with you. So let's go over here, and we'll go to the browser, and let's actually add a player folder. I have a player folder. Okay. Let's actually go in here, and we're going to create a player directive. Okay. So we'll say player directive JS. This is going to be juke directive player function. And we're going to go over here, and we're going to return an object. And again, let's just start this off. We'll say player here. And if we were to go and we need to include this in our index, we'll go over here, and this is going to be our player directive. Player, not controller, but player directive. And if we now go to our, scroll down on this page, just to sort of see if we can get this in here, we could go over here and put in player, and we should get some text to show up. And if we scroll down here, we should see in our footer the word player. So what we want to do here is, again, this is a quick win here. What we're going to do is we're going to say template URL. And this is going to be /JS. And this is going to be player templates player.html. So let's now go over here. And we'll actually add this. Let's just see if we have any errors here, which hopefully we won't. So we don't see any errors. That's a good sign. And now we could go in here and go to our index page and move all this stuff here. And we're going to end up moving it to our player. And if we do that, and we click on this, we'll see our player will show up. Turn that sound off. Okay. So that's fine. That works, right? This is all pretty much self-contained. One of the things that we could do is that nothing would really prevent us from saying, hey, look, do we really need to have this? And I sort of leave this up to you, but just to sort of look at all the things that we've looked at up to this point, just so you know how to do it. If we end up looking at our player, we've got this player controller. One of the things that we could do here is that if we decided to go to our directive, we could go over here and we could put our link function in here. And our link function, again, just to sort of realize we can do this, is going to take a scope, element, and attributes in that order. There's no injection that's going on here. And there's nothing that prevents us from doing this, so that when we end up copying and pasting code, right, it'll end up using the same variable name. And what we could do here if we wanted to, and let's do it just so that this is something that you might want to do, is that this controller is fairly light. So let's go into this controller, and we're going to take all this stuff out here. And I'm going to go back to my directive, and I'm going to paste this in. Again, not necessarily saying that this is a huge win any way around. Maybe we got rid of one less file. Maybe that's a win. But what we're going to do here, there's a couple things that we're going to need to do. We're going to need to get the player factory. So again, we can end up injecting it in the link, but there's nothing that prevents you from injecting it here. So now we've got our player, we've got our scope. And what I'm going to end up doing here is that now I'm going to go and actually get rid of this controller. And let's just modify one thing in our player directive. Now we don't need to have this controller, because the controller is going to be determined by what's inside the link function. In fact, we don't have a controller, period, but all these methods are going to be on our scope. And they're going to be on our scope because they are going to be on our scope. So this angular extend is basically taking all the methods of the player factory and making them available on our scope. Basically copying anything that's on that player factory. That's why on our scope we have that get current song, because we're actually doing it. We're sort of delegating that we have on the player factory. We're going to make them available on our scope. We're extending the player factory object. It's a way that you end up basically extending an object. And you could manually gone and done this and sort of looped over every key in the player factory and gotten the same results by putting that on the scope, but this makes it a little bit easier. Okay?
Is that the same as dependency injection?
No.
What's the difference then?
You're saying the angular extend?
Yes. I mean, what? So how is that different from injecting the player?
Because what I want to do, so it's a very good question. What I really want to do, if I didn't want to do this extend, okay, look at the different methods in the player factory.
Sure.
Okay, so right now my player factory, let's look at our, it's a very, very good question. If I didn't want to do this, okay, what I'm going to do is let's take a look at my template here for my player. So I've got a couple of things that I want to be able to do. I want to be able to call toggle, which I have in there, but I also want to be able to call next, previous, and get current song. These are all methods of my player factory. Okay? So what I can end up doing here, if I didn't want to do this extend, I could say scope dot next equals player factory dot next, and scope dot prev equals player factory. What is it? Previous? I think it's, let's see, previous. Player factory previous is equal to scope dot previous equals player factory previous, and scope dot get current song equal to player factory at current song.
So with extend, you don't have to make those getter and setter functions?
It's doing the same thing. It's basically looping over. What it's basically doing is it's extending an object. It's saying, hey, look, there are methods and properties on the player factory, and I want them available to me. So instead of actually exposing them to the scope, which is what we want to do. This will work totally fine too.
Can you do that in a controller?
Sure, you can do that. This is just a method of an object. Right. I could say angular extend empty object to player factory. Yeah. Let's see it, just so you could see it. Let's get this to work, and then let's use angular extend. You might not have used it before, but if I go and do this, this should still work. So here's my player, and I could go to the next, and I could go to the previous, and I can pause, maybe. I think I forgot to do pause, right? So the other thing in my player, I also want to be able to, there's a couple of other ones, right? There is playing that I want to be able to do, and I didn't do that one. So to get this to work, I'd have to say scope is playing. So just realize that scope is just an object. And basically I'm saying, hey, look, to my scope object, if the key is playing, okay, I want to use this function player factory is playing. You're going to call is playing on the player factory. And so here, the pause button should be working now. If I do this, I'm going to have to get rid of this player controller. So this plays, and it pauses, and it goes to the next, and it goes to the previous. Previous doesn't seem to be working. Let's see if I have a misspelling here. Scope.previous.
Previous is working, it just wrapped around.
Oh, did it? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe it's, I don't know. Yeah, maybe I thought I had less songs. All right, it is working. Okay, so again, just to your, so this gives us the same result, but just so you could see this. It was an empty object. Angular extend. Foo. Console log. Foo was empty before. Over here, while we're here, let's actually just go to our index file and get rid of this. Player controller. Get rid of that message. So now we've got this object that has all methods on it. Okay? Just basically extend, copies them. They look. You know that if you have an object, you could just say object, right, for each on the keys and get the value. That's all it's doing. Right? It's passing those. Those are all functions, so they end up getting passed by reference.
So, quick follow-up question. And so, using extend, if you have, let's say, a function on your scope or a property that shares it,
Absolutely.
Okay.
Right.
Cool.
But we know we don't have too much here on our scope. Again, the other takeaway here is, again, just realizing, and hopefully you do at this point, we said really right from the beginning, that the scope is nothing more than an object, right, that's going to be accessible within the template. And here we're just adding these methods to it. So let's go over here. By the way, one other way, and not to beat a dead horse, but one other way I've sort of seen this done, and you could do it this way too, is if you didn't want to do this, you could do something like scope player factory equals player factory. And at that point, you have the player factory. If you went back here, you could go over here and say ng click player factory toggle. It's probably a little bit easier to just deal with the scope object and let the scope do it, but this will work just as fine if I reload this. This will toggle the same exact way. All right, let's undo that and just say toggle. Again, we want to make our view kind of as dumb as possible and just have our view toggle. And again, we're just doing a little bit of work with our directive by doing this extend.
Eric?
Yeah.
When they say keep controller thing, are they referring to the amount of code you put in it, or the amount of memory that could potentially be used up by?
No, I don't think that. Not saying, hey, look, if you have your controller should just be responsible for the things that it needs to be responsible for. I always think about the controller as sort of this conductor, right? And it sort of knows where to get things. And so it has access to a factory. The factory could end up getting things, and the controller then passes them through to the view through the scope.
So it's like an interface.
It's an interface, right? It's in between these things, right? So it's very controllable. So let's go over here and let's, this now has taken care of our player directive. And let's look at one other thing here. Let's look at some other duplicated code here. So if we end up looking at the template for our playlist, I have a bunch of songs, right? If we end up looking at the album, we've got a bunch of songs. If we end up looking at the artist songs, we've got a bunch of songs. Exact same code in 3 different spots. So you could surely make the case someone might want to, again, this is sort of by design, you want your interface to look consistent in these 3 spots. So we could definitely see the need for going in and creating a directive for this. So let's actually create a directive that we'll end up calling song list. And what we can do here is let's start out with just doing it in one spot. Let's actually say that we'll do it under the details of an album. So we've got an album. So what we want to be able to do here is do something like song list. Song list. Okay. And again, I always just want to do a little sanity check to see that I'm in the right spot. So let's go here to our albums. And if we drill down on an album, we should see this foo here, which is, I want to replace this with a directive. To my my starting point here is to go over here and actually go to we'll do this under song. And we'll say this is going to be a song list directive JS. And so this is going to be juke directive. Again, since it's kebab case, we're going to make this camel case. And before I dig all that much deeper, over here, and we're going to say this is going to be a template, and we'll say to song list. Now if I go back here, I should see nothing, and the reason I see nothing is because I forgot to bring this directive in through my index page. So we'll go over here, and this is going to be song, and this is going to be song list directive.
Did you already call for that directive in your HTML yet?
I have not. Right, I just created it and I didn't change my index page yet. Right? So again, when you define the directives, templates come in dynamically.
Yeah.
Right? But anything that's any of your directives, your controllers, your filters, okay, all of those have to be in your states. All of those have to be in the, you can't load them dynamically. They all have to be loaded. So now we go over here. And we can see to do song list. And now let's go to this song list directive and we'll modify it. So this is not a template, but it's going to be a template URL. And this is going to be /JS songs, and we're going to have templates song list.html. Doesn't exist yet. We'll throw an error here, which we expect. If we go back over here, song list.html. And once we do that, that error will go away. We hope. Let's take a look and see why it's not finding it. Make sure that that's what our error is. So it's not finding song list, and I probably put in JS, not songs, but song. All right, so now we don't have any errors. Let's go back, and we will go back to our browser. This was the one under album. And here's our song list. Let me get rid of this foo, and let me take this entire thing out. And let's now go back to our song template, song list, and paste this in. And this will work. I mean, again, we're not setting up any isolate scope. Whatever was on the scope before is on the scope inside of this directive. Joe, where are you going? Oh. Just checking. So we'll go over here. And this should work as well. Okay. Now again, let's just look at this code for a minute. Working, but really we want to use it in a couple of different places. We have songs on a playlist, an artist has songs, and an album has songs. What's common between all three of those? Songs. So that's what we want to pass. Whenever we want to pass an object, we do it by putting it on a scope. So again, now we sort of have an idea that we have to do this. So we could go over here and we can modify our song list directive. And this is going to be scope. And we'll go over here and we'll say we're going to pass in songs. So now at this point, we're going to be looking at nothing here because we don't have any songs that are on the scope of our directive. But again, we're going to pass them in. Things end up getting passed in by attributes. We haven't had to use any kebab case or camel case attributes for the moment. But again, if my songs, don't forget that on your attribute, it's going to be my songs, okay? But we have no need for that. It's silly. So we're just going to do songs. And now if we end up going over to back to our album, which we have open over here, now we could say, hey, we're passing in the songs. These are objects. That's why we use the equal sign. Album dot songs. Now, we still have no songs. Okay. So let's see why not. Oh, someone tell me. How come we don't have any songs? We don't have any errors, but we don't have any songs. How come? What did I miss?
Probably the song album songs.
Mm-hmm. Right, so now, again, the playlist, there's no reason that the playlist has to have any concept of an album. About songs, okay? So now, we could go over here, and we could specify that this is just songs. Now, we'll end up getting our songs back, okay? Now, let's just see what happens here. We go to play, and nothing is really happening. The reason why nothing is happening is that we ended up isolating our scope. And so now these methods toggle, right? All these methods that we have had before, they're not available to us now, okay? Again, we've isolated our scope. These methods don't exist on our scope that this template is looking at, so it has no idea what to do. Let's just see where these are, right? Let's look at where they were before. If we go back to here was our albums. And if we go and look at our album controllers, we've got our album control and we've got these methods. What we really need to do is to take these methods and pull them out and pull them into our directive. So if we end up going back to our directive here, our song list directive, how do we end up adding things to the scope? Well, for now, the easiest way to do it is to go in here and catch this. Again, this is not dependency injection that's going on here. I could paste this in. Move this over too. Move this over too. Move this back. Code nice and pretty. Okay. Now, I don't have dependency injection here. within my link, but I surely have it up here in my directive. So this is going to be player factory. Now, there's one thing that we have a little bit of a problem with, where if you end up looking at our toggle function, one of the things we need to pass to our player is the collection of songs, right? So right now, before, we were getting those songs through the album, but again, the player itself doesn't care that the songs came from an album or a playlist, right? Or the list of songs for a particular artist, doesn't care, just knows that it needs to get its songs. And here are songs. So again, I've taken this, I've put this on our scope, scope.toggle, scope.getCurrentSong, scope is playing. And now if I reload this, we have an error.
Maybe you could do scope that song.
Yeah, scope.toggle is a song.
Thank you. So here, this is going to be our scope.songs, right? Good call, guys. Good call. I did that on purpose. See if you guys are still with me. Okay, so if we do this, we play, we toggle, next, previous, etc. That all works. Okay. Now again, the beauty of this is that I want to go to these other two spots. So I want to be able to, here's my song list directive. I shouldn't really have to touch that again. The two files that I'm going to look at modifying are going to be under my artist. Here's the artist songs. So these songs are going to be the artist songs, so I should be able to do something like this. Song list, songs equals the songs of the artist. Now, if I do that, I should be able to take this out, take out this entire table. That's my directive. Now, if I go over here, here's my artist. Let's reload this guy. And here are the songs, right, of the artist. Okay? So we've got that. That works. Because this was being defined by a controller. This was one of our views. It was one of our states that it was being defined with. But all these methods here can now come out. No need for it. In fact, we could actually even clean things up a little bit more, where we could basically say, hey, look, we don't even need the player factory here. The player directive will take care of the player factory for us. If we go over here, this will work the same way. Okay? We've got one more spot that we need to do this in. So right now we've got a playlist. And here's our template for our playlist, which again has the exact same code here. There's one variation here where we don't want to end up showing the table if in fact there are no songs here, but we could probably solve that issue fairly easily and test it out. Okay? So what we could do here is, again, we're going to have a song list, but this time the songs are going to be the playlist songs. And
We just moved that NG show up into the song list directive.
Why do you have to take my thunder, John? That's what I wanted to do.
I thought you was, we can let that later.
So, sure. So let's test it out. So we go over here. I mean, we still have our, our song chooser control and that sort of thing. But now if we end up going back here and we go to our playlist, right? We don't want this to show up. So here we could just basically, nothing prevents us on a, on a directive. Again, it's our own custom element to do something like ng show only if playlist dot songs length. Right? If it's got a length, we're going to end up showing it. So now it'll end up hiding that table. If we end up adding a song, it'll end up adding that for us, right? So let's also just be consistent here and clean this up a little bit. We have our playlist. We have our playlist is over here, and we actually want to look at our controller. So here's our controller. This is for the forum. And for the playlist controller, we've got this toggle, get current song, and so on. These can all come out. And now this should work the same way. Right, we could add another song. Other features that you might want to think about doing, and we sort of looked at this with Trip Planner, is that obviously maybe removing songs from the playlist, but also maybe the idea that once you end up adding a song to the playlist, it shouldn't end up showing up in your drop-down list. I think that there is some logic in the back end that doesn't let a duplicate song go in your playlist, although I was able to, I think, get one in there. But ideally, why even show it to the user if they end up having it here? One other thing that you might want to do here is it might be nice when you're, let's just say that I decided I wanted to make a playlist. I'm really into this Dexter guy, right? So I want to go over here and I want to create a playlist. I just had a little scrolling here. So I'm going to create a playlist. I'm going to say this is going to be Dexter's list. Ooh, too long. Look at that. Yeah, look at that nice orange. So we'll create the playlist. Okay. And the other thing that I don't think I mentioned, or it's in the solution, is that we're actually programmatically going to a playlist. When a playlist ends up getting created, it's going to be the responsibility of the playlist controller, so that when our playlist controller gets created, here we're programmatically changing our route. Okay, so we basically are saying to our UI router, we created a playlist. We want to go to that playlist, and the way that you do that is that this is the name of your. These are any parameters that are going to your state. So one thing we might want to do here is that we might want to just make it a little bit easier to choose a particular song by showing the artist who sings that song. So let's just think about how we could go about doing that.
Could you do have that kind of sorted and grouped by the artist, like all the artist songs would be together?
Sure.
And then
you could sort them by the artist and that sort of thing if you wanted to do it. I don't know how much control select objects are a little. Dan, you know this. I mean, they could be a real pain in the ass to work with. There's probably other
ng repeats or something where you
yeah.
get a lot of granularity.
Right, and there's probably like sort of third-party controls that might make that a little bit easier. I bet you Bootstrap has something that would allow you to do that. But let's just sort of see if we can sort of get this to work. What I'm going to do here is that I'm going to go to here's my playlist, and here's my playlist form. So in my playlist form, I've got, actually this is not the thing that I'm looking at, it's actually my playlist that I want. On my playlist, I've got this NG option song. You don't need this. I saw this here before. I think basically you could just do, I think you could just say song.name for song, I think. Let's see if I'm correct about that. This is something that Alex and Jason had asked about. Yeah, I don't know what that really sort of buys you here, but let's just say that I wanted to display something else. I mean, maybe I want to do something other, maybe there's some sort of fuller thing that I want to show for my song. Maybe the song and maybe a pipe and the name of the artist.
The way I saw the difference there was that if you try it right now, would you still be able to add?
I don't know. Let's see. I think so. Yeah, it still works. I don't know. I'm not sure what that was. Therefore, we'll have to ask Gabe about it. I think he had done this solution, which ended up doing that. I think when we did it before, I just did song.name, and it worked. That's why I remembered it worked.
What were you saying? You're trying to select something? Or you're trying to change the...
No, this was, before I did this, we had song as song.name. It doesn't accomplish anything. I'm not sure what it's there for.
It's the whole object, right? Like you'd be saying the whole object, right? As the value of the thing that's said.
Yeah, but I think it works totally fine without it. Basically, the way that I read this and the way that I understand it is it says display song.name for each song in songs. And when we go to add, we're still going to end up getting the song itself, I think, unless I'm missing something. There's a very easy way to find that out, which is to look at our playlist controller. In fact, we're going to wrap this up real quick. But if we end up looking at our playlist controller, if I make that change, and we have here's our playlist form, and here's our playlist controller. When we say add song, if I say console.log song, let's see if we get the actual song, which I think we will.
I know, I mean, I'm not sure if I'm right about this, but I know if you don't do the full syntax for NG options, you can't actually like set a scope variable and then pre-select a thing. You know, you want to like populate a default value or something?
I don't know. I would put it to you like this. So here, and again, sometimes it gets a little bit tricky to sort of figure out where you are. You want to do.
I was going to say, if you look at the rendered HTML,
yeah,
the value is going to be the object literal.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, it's like the value. Yeah, we run into that.
Ah, that's interesting. Okay. And what if you don't do it? So the rendered HTML.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
And like, if you want to like set it, you know, you can't set it unless you do the full syntax.
So here. So I just did song, and I've got object 33. Okay.
That's probably just.
Well, it doesn't look like the whole song object, right? I mean, this is.
Well, the database is accepting it.
Well, I think the database is accepting it because it's still stored. It's still attaching the song to it. I mean, it has the song in memory, and it's going to use that particular song. I mean, the difference between doing that and, let's see, maybe you're right. What was it, song as? So here's our select. No, guys, looks the same to me. So I don't know, unless I'm missing something. If you want to do song ads, you could do it.
If you do track by, I think it's track by or something.
You only need to do that. Yeah, you only need to. You don't need it. You only need to do that if you have two objects that are exactly the same. But either way, we'll find out. You know, it's not like it's a big mystery. Gabe, I think, is still alive and well, so we can ask him on. We can ask him on Tuesday. So the solution is actually posted up there already. There's also the directive with the double click, which is something I haven't really done, where it's actually parsing something out, which I haven't seen before. So I wasn't necessarily comfortable with looking at that until I know a little bit more about it. But that's up there. Let's actually, so we could get out of here on time, let's actually do the hot seat. So we're going to do 4 people today. Let's start out with me. So we could get out of here at, 4 people. We'll get out of here maybe 10 minutes late. So does anyone need to run to the bathroom real fast? 5-minute break, real fast, come back.